So when making homemade pasta dough, there are a few things to consider, and the first thing to consider is what type of pasta dough you're gonna make. The most popular types of pasta dough people know of in America are the egg dough and the semolina dough. Egg dough is made with 00 flour and eggs, and then the semolina dough is just made with semolina flour and water. Today, we are going to be making my go-to egg pasta dough recipe. We want to make sure we have 00 flour. I know this doesn't say 00 on it. My grocery store used to have 00, and in the past month or so they haven't been selling it, but they just restocked, and they've restocked with pizza flour, which pizza flour is also apparently made with 00, but Gold Medal this is a new product for them, and I could not find more information about this flour. So just knowing that pizza flour is usually 00, I'm gonna say that this is 00. And then you have your eggs. One of the most important things about your eggs is you want them to be room temperature, and you do want them to be a good quality egg. The egg that also has the more orange yolk in it. That orange is going to equal out to more flavor and fat. It's going to equal out to more fat, which fat equals flavor, right? So we want flavor within our pasta, especially if we only have 2 ingredients. We want to make sure we have the flavor from the fat in this egg, and the good egg, and then we have the supple nature of the 00 flour. The reason why 00 flour is more sought over for pasta making is because its grain. Its grain is much finer. It's the finest grain flour that's out there. It's much finer than an all-purpose. But when adding your liquids, your wet ingredients, your eggs to it, it absorbs at a different rate and a different percentage. So its hydration, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard around the whole bread making scene, but it's very important when working with flours, is it's hydration. So 00 flour doesn't hold as much hydration as an all-purpose flour. So if you're working with a recipe that uses all-purpose flour, just know that that creator of that recipe has indicated all-purpose flour because they have matched the amount of liquid that they're adding to that to get the right hydration point. With me, I'm using 00 flour, so I have a certain ratio for the eggs that I'm going to be putting into that 00 flour, because 00 flour doesn't absorb as much liquid as an all-purpose flour. Also with 00 flour, since it is a lot more finer grain, it is going to be a much more supple end product. It's going to be softer. We want a certain amount of elasticity with our pasta. We don't want it to like cling back after we've rolled it out. We want it to after it's been rolled, basically stay in its shape, but also be very firm and sturdy in that shape. So again, that's why the flour is so important when you're working with pasta dough. While I am putting this together, I'm also going to explain to you more of my techniques and tricks for making pasta. One of the top techniques and the top tricks is to measure out your ingredients, okay? And measure out in grams. That is the most accurate way of measuring. And so make sure you do that for both your dry ingredients as well as your wet ingredients. You want to measure out in grams. Okay, so I got my scale on. I'm going to tear it out. And I'm going to start with 500 grams of 00 flour. Now I'm going to go on to my room temperature eggs. And yeah, I'm measuring them out. Okay, I want 250 grams of eggs. Okay, so 1 egg. Okay, this is 44 grams. And that is a nice colored yolk. It's not as orange as I've seen before, but it is going to be a nice fatty yolk. I might be just under, let's see, 240. Okay, 243. I'm probably gonna take out some of my flour just to keep that ratio at 50%. We've got our ingredients measured, right? You would want 500 grams of 00 flour and 250 grams of some good quality room temperature eggs. So now the next tip is you want to make your pasta dough on a wooden surface. So this is my cutting board, my butcher block cutting board that I use basically for everything, as well as pasta making. Create a nice big well for you to add your eggs into. And now I just break the yolks usually and then just start whisking. So first I whisk my eggs together so they're all nice and homogeneous and incorporated. The egg yolk and the egg white is incorporated with one another. And as I'm doing this now, some of the flour is starting to get in there, which is what you want. You can like bring it in like this if you want to. You can just bring your fork around. And so we're trying to get this very thick before we start kneading it. Almost like, I guess, like a pancake batter or cake batter consistency. Okay, now we're gonna move on to the bench scraper. I'm gonna clean off my fork. And after kind of a little bit of the cutting technique, I do this kind of like scoop and fold, kind of getting ready to knead the ingredients together. I'm going to start kneading. And trying to get all of this consistently hydrated. Okay, so I've been working at this dough and it was a lot drier than usually what I work with. So this pizza flour by Gold Medal isn't like the same. It doesn't have the same properties as the other flour I used to use. But what I've been doing, because this definitely can happen to you, it should not be this tough to knead. I'm putting a lot of muscle into it, and I've been kneading it for a good 5-7 minutes now. What you can do, which I'm gonna do again, I'm gonna kind of open it up a little bit, and I'm gonna get my hands wet, just damp, and then add a little bit more hydration to the bread, and then just knead it for another couple minutes for it to get incorporated and a little bit softer. You know, when I started this whole adding water process, it was very much like a shaggy, very dry. You could still tell that there was like flour and clumps. So from that to this is a world of difference. Okay, so I'm gonna add just a little bit more water. And then this will be our 7th time and our last time. Oh yeah, that 7th edition of wet hands, adding water with wet hands, was the trick. This is a lot similar to what the dough usually is like. Okay, so I am just gonna continue kneading it. I've probably been kneading it for 2 minutes since I last added a little bit of water. I'm gonna clear off my board. Okay, and just probably knead it for another couple minutes, and then we're just gonna let it rest, and it'll be pretty spectacular to see the difference after it rests for 10 minutes, how softer it is. Well, it's still stiff, right? So you can either wrap this in plastic wrap. I usually put my flour bowl on top of it. Okay, so it's been about 15 minutes, so let's uncover this and see how, let's get that focused, how our dough turned out. Much better. Okay, this dough is ready to be rolled out. I always use my pasta machine. This is an Atlas 150, if that helps. And it has a little handle that you put into it, and it has this C-clamp that hooks into this little hole that then you can clamp it onto the top of your counter and roll it out. This is my little corner where I always roll out my pasta, and I even have to open up one of these lower cabinet doors in order to fit the C-clamp on my countertops. But you do want to get that really tight, so little movement, and then you just put in your handle. With this Atlas, it goes from 0 all the way up to 9. And yeah, we're gonna start at 0. Sometimes you might have to flour it, but this dough right now is not that wet to where I feel confident in not flouring it right now. I might have to later. But what I'm doing is kind of kneading it some more through the pasta machine, and also kind of getting a shape that I like. I usually try to make it a rectangle. Okay, so that's a good shape, I feel. And now I'm gonna move on to number 1. I usually roll it to a thickness of 4. And that's what I'm at right now. There's a little short pasta sheet. I'll still make the spaghetti out of that. But typically for other pastas like a fettuccine or a tagliatelle, I usually go up to 6 or 7. But with the Chitarra shape, I go to a size 4, so I make it a little bit thicker. Another tool that you're going to need is Chitarra, which is this device right here. It's called a Chitarra, which means guitar, because it's strung with guitar strings. On both sides, you'll see 2 different widths of guitar strings. This width is a little bit more like a fettuccine size, and then you turn it around and this is a lot closer together, which is more of like a spaghetti size. So I'm gonna use the spaghetti and I'll show you how this puppy works. So you take your slightly thicker pasta sheet and you put it on the side of which you want cut, and then you just take a rolling pin and push it through. Add a little bit of flour just so when it falls through they don't stick together. This dough is a little bit drier, which is actually good, so it'll even be less prone to sticking once it goes through the guitar strings. And you turn it out and you got your spaghetti. So after you cut your spaghetti, it's good to put it on a plate or a cookie sheet, which I do, and you want it to be floured. It's better if it's with like semolina. I just used this pizza flour that I have. But you do want to kind of spread it out so it can start drying a little bit and not clumping to one another. Even like sprinkling some more flour on top would help. Because as it sits, it could have a tendency to stick to one another, and that we don't want that. Now I want to take a closer look into the shape of spaghetti alla chitarra. Since you are cutting it with those guitar strands, you're not coming out with a cylindrical shape like most think of when they think of spaghetti. You are coming out with, I don't know if you'll be able to catch this on camera, but a square spaghetti. And that is what I think makes this pasta shape exceptional, because those corners, those 4 corners that make up the square of your spaghetti, are going to adhere to the pasta sauce even more so than if it was just rounded. During the cooking process and then like the marrying of the cooked pasta with the sauce, those corners of the spaghetti alla chitarra will kind of get all craggly. Some might crack off, some will have like kind of like dimples and holes in it, and that is what the sauce clings to. The best way to measure portion size for fresh pasta is 100 grams of flour per person. So I used 500 grams of flour. That means that this is a serving size. This batch is a serving size for 5 people. It's a pretty easy math, and after seeing it all laid out, you can see that this is probably good enough for 5 people. So if you want to double the recipe, if you have a dinner party of 8 people, you would do 800 grams of flour, and then half of that, 400 grams of eggs. So pretty simple math. So I have everything ready for cooking my pasta. I have my pasta water has been salted like the sea, so a good amount of salt that goes in there, and it is boiling. And the sauce that I'm going to be pairing with my pasta today is a vodka sauce, so I have that ready on the stove top. And then I have all my my pasta right here ready to go. I'm not gonna put all this in at once. I might do it in batches, maybe in like 3 or 4 batches. And as soon as I cook it, it's gonna cook for just like 2 minutes. I don't want to cook it all the way through because I'm gonna finish the cooking process in the vodka sauce. Okay, so I'm gonna take a good amount, just kind of sprinkle it in. And then I'm gonna stir it just a little bit so it doesn't all settle down and clump together. And this is gonna take a minute at most. It's gonna take 2 minutes because I'm gonna finish cooking it in the sauce so the sauce really clings to it. I'm gonna bring my vodka sauce right here. It's all ready. And well, that, you know, I'm gonna put this in since it's gonna be cooking in the vodka sauce even longer than these other pieces. Okay, I don't even think that was a whole minute. I think, if anything, that might have been like 50 seconds. Let that come back up to a boil. It's gonna be really quick, but I'm gonna start stirring this in. And I'm actually gonna pull some of this pasta water, again, gold, right? I'm gonna do like a ladle and a half in there right now. That's gonna help thicken it up, believe it or not, because there's a good amount of starch in that water now after cooking the pasta in there. Okay, it's coming back up to a boil. I'm gonna do round 2. Bring this back over here so it can be on a low heat. The final round. Okay, I'm gonna pull the last of the pasta out and put it in the sauce. So I'm gonna finish cooking this pasta in the sauce over here. I did add about a ladle and a half already of pasta water, and I'm just gonna let it finish. It's on medium low. I'm gonna just let it finish setting up in here. Okay, let's plate the pasta. I like to take a pair of tongs and a nice big ladle, twist it. Let's top it off with some grated Parmigiano Reggiano. And some freshly cracked black pepper. Buon appetito. The crunch. I don't want to say it's a crunch, but the sturdiness of that fresh pasta, so good. And the vodka sauce is great. I love a good tomato sauce and then add some cream in it. Yes, sign me up. I love it. But honestly, the homemade pasta, the spaghetti alla chitarra, is the star of the show. Since I made it thicker, instead of making it as thin as I usually make like a fettuccine, and I didn't cook it for as long in the water, it has that like al dente-ness to it that it's so So good. Look how beautiful that dish is. I hope you give spaghetti alla chitarra a try. If not, hopefully you give fresh pasta a try. It is so near and dear to my heart. I love it so much, and I think it definitely levels up your pasta game.